In order to ensure that healthcare providers and researchers are referring to the same parts of the body, there has to be a very precise language that we all use to discuss features and functions. It's a technical terminology that's been developed to describe body position, direction, body areas, regions, body cavities, and they're very different than what we use in everyday conversation. For instance, I might tell you that I've got a backache. Well, that really doesn't tell you a lot. Is it in the area of my scapula, which would be scapular? Is it the back of my neck? Well, neck is cervical. Is it the middle part of my back? That would be thoracic. Is it the lower part of my back, lumbar or sacral? Is it of the hips? Oh goodness, we could just go on forever. So in order for us to understand what people are referring to, we use anatomical position and anatomical terminology. Correct anatomical position is required so that everyone knows exactly what part of the body you're talking to, and you have a frame of reference when you're comparing body areas or talking about one body part in reference to another. So it requires we have a common initial point of reference, and that is what we call anatomic or anatomical position. As you can see in this image, you're standing upright, your feet are parallel and flat on the floor. The upper limbs are at the sides of your body with your palms facing forward. We use the word anterior for forward. So palms are facing anteriorly, the head is level, and the eyes are looking forward. Now, think about why this is important. You could say that the heart is superior to the stomach. Superior means above. Well, if you're standing in correct anatomical position, then obviously, yes, the heart, which is located in the chest, would be above the stomach, which is located in the abdomen. But what if you're lying down in what we call a supine or prostrate position? Not prostate, that's a gland, but prostrate, that's lying down. Now, is the stomach, or is the heart still superior above the stomach? No, they're on the same plane. So in order for that to make sense and to be correct anatomically, you must be referring to correct anatomical position. So from this point forward, anytime we're referring to terminology, anytime we're referring to body parts and pieces and regions and areas, we will always assume correct anatomical position unless otherwise stated, or if the picture labels it and tells us we're looking at the posterior, the back, or whatever the case may be. Now, anatomists also refer to real or imaginary slices of the body when we're looking at different body areas and things that are within the body. So the term section refers to an actual cut or slice that exposes the internal anatomy. Think about the word dissection. It means to cut. So a section is a real cut or slice. A plane is an imaginary flat surface that passes through the body. There are three major planes that pass through the body. Now remember, imaginary plane. We're just using this to visualize, okay? So it's not an actual cut. Coronal plane is also called a frontal plane, and it divides the body or a particular part of the body, an organ, into a front and back. So if you look right here, this is a coronal or frontal section through the skull. So you can see here, that is your plane that refers to this section. Okay, so coronal divides into a front and back, or using correct terminology, anterior and posterior. Transverse is a horizontal plane. So it's sometimes called a cross section. It divides into a top and bottom, or again, with correct anatomical terminology, superior and inferior. So if you look right here, you can see we have made a plane through the skull, separating into a top and a bottom. And here you can see a transverse section of medical imaging using a transverse plane. The third plane is actually covered on the next slide, but I wanted to go ahead and mention it now since we've got this great picture here. So sagittal is a plane that divides a body or a structure into a left and right. So you can see right here, we have a mid-sagittal plane. And if you look here at the skull, there's a mid-sagittal section of the skull, showing the brain and the entire head divided into a left and right. Mid-sagittal refers to right down the center. So again, mid-sagittal would be right down the center, dividing the body or the structure into a left and right, as you can see here with the leg. So sagittal can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be mid-sagittal. Mid-sagittal means right down the middle. But sagittal, again, can be any plane or section that divides the body or the structure into a left and right. Now here's another example of transverse, and here is oblique. Oblique is at an angle. So if you do a straight transverse section through the arm, you would get this little round looking structure, and there you can see the muscle, and there you can see the humerus and the skin surrounding. Now imagine if this were an arm instead of a leg. You can see oblique creates more of an oval rather than a circular structure, but you still see the same things. You see the muscles, you see the bones of the lower leg, and the skin. And over here, a sagittal section through the entire leg. Now this one would be a mid-sagittal because as you can see, it runs right down the center of the leg. But you can see the upper bones in the leg and the muscles in upper and lower as well. So you may be wondering, why is all this important? Well, being able to interpret body sections is very important for healthcare professionals. The advances with medical imaging have been able to produce sectional images of internal body structures. So in order to determine the shape or the size of any object within a section, we have to be able to take many different images and sort of compile them into one view. Fortunately, technology does that for us, but this allows us to be able to see the size and the shape of an organ and also something like a tumor that may be found within them. So sectioning the body or organ along different planes very often results in very different views. I mean, for instance, look at this image. It's just a piece of the intestine. So here we have a section that produces just a little circle, right? Okay, well, if we run a section this way obliquely, we get a nice long oval shape. Well, let's look right over here. If we do these two sections, well, this one produces two circular structures. This one that's a little bit further to the left gives us a nice big oval. And you can see right here as well how this, if you cut two sections right here, gives you very different views depending on where that cut is made. So these images are serial sections through the intestine. They're used to reconstruct the three-dimensional structure. Very often a single section, such as any of these planes, let's take this one, okay, so this nice long oval right here. If that's the only image we have, then it would be very easy to misinterpret the complete structure. The next few slides I'm going to cover really quickly because you're going to get all of this in lab, and we'll just take a quick look at these now. And I always tell my students, I don't want you to be able to just define all of this terminology that you're learning. I want you to be able to apply it. For instance, if I tell you that there was a laceration on the anterior aspect of the abdomen, I would want you to know exactly where that is so that you could find that and pinpoint it. So again, I'm going to cover this very quickly and let's get rolling. So anterior refers to the front of the body. Posterior refers to the back. There are two other terms that are used interchangeably in the human, and that is dorsal and ventral. Dorsum refers to the back. Ventral refers to the gut. So obviously in the human, the gut is anterior and the dorsum is posterior. So anterior and posterior, same terms, can be interchangeable with ventral for anterior, dorsal for posterior. Superior means above, inferior means below. The patellar region, that's your knee, is superior to the plantar region, which is the bottom of the foot. The patellar region is inferior to the abdomen. It is below the abdomen. So superior above, inferior below. Medial toward the midline, lateral toward the side. Think of a lateral pass in football. So the arms are lateral to the torso. The umbilicus, your navel, your belly button, is medial to the coxal region, your hips. Proximal, think close to. Distal, think far away. So let's look here at the arm. The hand is distal to the shoulder. The antecubital region is proximal to the carpal region. Okay, so proximal, think closest to the point of attachment to the body, or if you're looking at a tubular structure like the gastrointestinal tract, then the esophagus is proximal to the colon. The colon is distal. It's closer to the end of the pathway. So if it's a pathway or a tube structure like that, proximal would be the beginning, distal would be the end. When we begin studying regional anatomy, we divide the body into two main areas. Axial is the head, the neck, and the trunk, and it forms the axis of the body. Appendicular are the limbs and the girdles that attach them. So the limbs, of course, are the arms and the legs. The girdles are your pelvic girdle, made up of your coxal or hip bones, and your pectoral or shoulder girdle, made up of the clavicle and the scapula. Now within these two regions, we have several others that are going to define smaller regional areas of the body. Again, you're going to get all of this in your lab, so I'm not even going to cover these guys, but I am going to tell you this is the type of thing, if I put it on your test, these are your easy questions. And again, guys, I don't want you to define these. I'm going to use them to apply them to the human body. For instance, over here, if we go with axillary. Well, axillary refers to the area of the armpit, common term. If I gave you a question that says, during a breast cancer biopsy, the surgeon removed 22 axillary lymph nodes. Where were those lymph nodes taken? And you would say axillary, because that is armpit. So again, all of these terms are anterior terms, meaning referring to the front of the body. Posterior terms, wow, there's more. Of course there is. Guys, I want you practicing using these terms. Take your kid and a washable marker and label on your child. Do it on your significant other. Do it on yourself. As you're in the shower and you're bathing your body and you're washing your shoulder, don't think shoulder, think deltoid. When you're washing your arm, name off the brachium, the antecubital, the olecranon, the antebrachium, the carpal. So practice using these terms so that it becomes second nature to you to call things by the proper names.